Welcome back, everyone. I need to make a new video for episode 5 reaction because the video that I made was destroyed by YouTube's copyright algorithmic process. So I had created a video. I am teaching myself how to do all these tricks with video editing. I am a complete novice at this, and I didn't think that I had done anything that wasn't within fair use, and I still don't think that. I had shown only small clips of the show and then had very long commentary on what I saw within those scenes, but YouTube still flagged it, and when I selected the option to allow YouTube to cut out the problematic parts, it essentially cut out everything. So I lost 40 minutes of commentary, which is a travesty. So this is a redo on episode 5 of The Wheel of Time. And what I want to do for this video is to give a little bit of a forward today, now that I've had a couple of days to think about this episode, and then sandwich in some of the content that was edited out of my video that was not seen by everyone, so the kind of raw reactions that I have, and then sum up with a conclusion on some of the things that I haven't yet touched. And I've got two cat guests today, so Cinder was on the chair next to me, and I've got Fritz on my lap right now, and they may or may not stick around, so we will see. So starting with kind of my overall feelings about The Wheel of Time. The big controversy with the TV show is this, strange divide between fans of the book who can't seem to adjust to the changes that are being made to the TV show, or who don't want to adjust to changes to the TV show. Their feeling is that nothing should have been changed, or that the TV show is changing more than they need to in order to convey the purest version of the story that Robert Jordan wrote. And then you have people like me who are really strong book fans, but really just want to enjoy a Wheel of Time TV show, even if they change a bunch of things. And I will admit that some of this has to do with my feelings about how book adaptions are translated to screen that have changed over time. So I used to be more of a purist, but then I've read a bunch of books and then saw those books translated to film, and the thing that bothers me the most about adaptations is when people who have not read the book can't understand the story from the adaptation. I feel like this happened particularly a lot in the Harry Potter movies. I'm not gonna dig into those now, but I remember watching them with people who had not read the books and having to pause it every so often to stop and explain what was going on, what the plot points were, because there were elements of the original story that were edited out for time purposes that just left gaping holes in understanding the important conflicts and events and character motivations that were not kept. So recognizing that the Wheel of Time is gargantuanly larger than Harry Potter ever was, even the longest books of Harry Potter don't come close to the length of a single Wheel of Time novel, there's going to be a lot of changes. Robert Jordan wrote over 2,000 named characters in the story. We are just not going to get that. And when you edit out a number of characters, you also have to make changes to the plot. And the really important thing to me is that somebody who has never read the books can sit down and enjoy this TV show, can get an understanding of the overall plot, the overall themes, the overall characters, and really enjoy the experience of the show, which will then inspire them to read the books. And then you have two versions of the story which stand on their own, and they're both great separately. That to me is as much as I want. So though I understand that there are people who are struggling with the changes that were made in order to adapt this to the TV screen, I'm not really feeling that way. It was jarring at first, and you can watch my episode 1 through 3 at Reaction, where I have a lot more negative things to say about how the story initially started. But after acclimating to the changes over that first week between, the drop of the first 3 episodes together and the airing of episode 4, I got used to it. And now I'm really enjoying the story because I don't actually know what's going to happen. I have a sense of what's going to happen from having read the books. I can make predictions about what they're going to do with the adaptation, but I don't actually know. And that actually makes the story more fun for me. So I'm hoping that, more people will get on board with the understanding that this is a really about the attitude with which you approach this storytelling medium and less about the accuracy that it reflects upon the book. So I just those are kind of my overall feelings. I know not everyone will agree, but I'm trying to take a moderate approach to reviewing these as a super fan of the books. I don't think it has to be one for one. I am happy to see different things being done in the TV show than were in the initial books altogether. So that's those are my feelings overall, and I just I hope that more people feel that way. So let's talk about episode 5. Episode 5 for me was a little bit less exciting than episode 4 in the sense that it does not end on or even really get to a big climactic arc, and I think that is intentional. I believe episode 5 is intended to be the beat between story, but between rising actions. So we have the show kind of starting off with this madcap dash of introduction to the Two Rivers, Winter's Night, traveling across the countryside, Shatter Logoth, everyone is separated. Journeys along the road, which they encounter dark friends. Things are dark and difficult. And then episode 4, we see some power coming back into our main cast in the character of Nynaeve in particular. And episode 5 deals with the aftermath of that battle or raid scene that happens in episode 4, which I get it's not in the books, but I feel like Robert Jordan would have loved the thematic approach that they are taking here. One of the things that I didn't really care for in Game of Thrones and really Lord of the Rings, if you think about it, is that the aftermath of battles are not grappled with. You don't really see, to the extent that you could, the characters struggling with all of the things that they have been through. I mean, you see it a little bit, but you get the sense in Game of Thrones in particularly that violence is just part of the world, that there is no way to live other than violently, and you have to accept and just survive all of the horrible things that are happening to these characters, even the deeply emotionally impactful ones. And that has never sat right with me as a storyteller and as somebody who is human and lives in the world. I much preferred the way Robert Jordan approached battles, where they were seen as these ugly, awful things that were sometimes necessary, and he really spends a lot of detail and time trying to get his audience to understand what is so awful about violence, and also why it sometimes is necessary or sometimes happens even when nobody really wants it to. So I appreciated that they spent a whole episode, dealing with the aftermath of this raid, which comparatively isn't even that big of a skirmish for what we know is in store for these characters in the future settings of the story. So I'm just, interested in how they did this. And what I really love about episode 5 is its dramatic performances. We get to see the acting range of these cast members that have not really been allowed to shine before this episode, and we really get to see them shine in this episode. Every single actor gets a moment where they are showing us how they are feeling just with their faces. And even that last scene that some people felt was too much, when Lan is taking on the burden of grief for all of the warders in the room. He's somewhat acting there. It is his real feelings, I think. We're supposed to believe that he really does feel that way. We can see that reflected in Moraine's face as she's feeling his emotions through the bond. But it's also about, having somebody to center the grief through that everyone in the room is feeling. And that scene, although it can be interpreted as melodramatic, I think if you allow yourself to sink into it and watch it without, joking or any serious commentary. Just allow yourself to feel it and to watch everyone's faces, including Nynaeve's face, which is kind of in the back behind Moraine. You will get why this particular episode was so emotionally evocative for viewers. And I have watched some react videos from people who were literally brought to tears by this episode, especially people who have dealt with depression, who have had people in their lives who have committed suicide, who have been through the death of somebody who is precious to them. I feel like this episode captures the importance of human emotion and the range of human emotion. I mean, really, the themes of this episode weren't even just that. It was about all the different types of love, and also the loss that comes when you love deeply, and that sets up the stakes for Wheel of Time. And I think the stakes are going to get even more intense in the next episode, the next coming episodes, but it was important to feel the impact on humans as individuals, and I think we see that through this character Stepan. And Robert Jordan did a lot of this. If you are as big of a fan of the books as you claim to be, you will know that there are so many chapters, so many scenes in the point of view of characters that we never see again. Because Robert Jordan, I think, really believed in this kind of slice of life way of storytelling, where he is focusing on all different kinds of people that are adjacent to the main storyline and adjacent to the main situation, and showing how things are impacting them. So if you look at Stepan as a character like that, this is a character who has been impacted by something that has happened to him, the untimely demise of his Aes Sedai. We get to understand through his experience how the warder bond with Aes Sedai works, why warders become warders, what the potential risk is in being a warder, and how revered the Aes Sedai are. And this is so thematically important in the overall story, just based on what happens later in the series when it comes to bonds in particular, among channelers and not just non-channelers, but channelers and channelers, and just, I don't know. I think that this was the time to make these conflicts understood by the viewing audience. So, while I was watching it, it felt a little slow, it felt a little dark, but after a couple of days, I found myself kind of ruminating on how the episode made me feel. And although it wasn't the excited feelings of episode 4, it did make me feel something, and that to me means it was well written. So I'm just really excited. I can't wait to see how they develop this story in the next and the last 3 episodes. I think it's going to be a rocket ship from here, and I couldn't be more pleased with how the story is being told. So, that being said, I want to get into some of the commentary and some of the raw reactions that I had when I was watching this, for the first time, and recording my reactions and capturing my commentary. And then at the end of all of that, I will add a little bit more commentary to my understandings of the episode now that I've watched it twice through after a day's break in between. So that is going to make up the majority of this video, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's do this. I'm doing a lot more with the aftermath of this battle than I expected, trying to show the emotional impact on everyone who was there. Again, development for Liandrin. They make her, they humanize her in this TV show, which might be a misdirect and might just be trying to round out that character a bit more than she is in the book series, and I don't dislike that. Also, her warder survived. Oh, I wonder though if they'll show how challenging that is. This is good character development for some plot points later in the book series. I really like Daniel Henley's performance as Lan. I've heard some people say that it's they expected him to be more stone cold, but Lan is not stone cold in the first couple of books. He becomes that way later. I like that they're showing his humanity in these earlier episodes so that that contrast is more dramatic and immediate. I like those choices. Okay, so this is how we're going to get to Tarval, and they're just going to skip the traveling. Our empty horse. Oh, I got Logain on like a leash now. Okay. I like that they're showing that he looks like he's been lobotomized. Is that the White Tower? I like their relationship. I particularly like that it's a platonic relationship. That's so rare in television. This is Moraine trusting in the pattern. I've said previously that she's kind of a religious character, and I mean that in the sense that Moraine believes that the wheel has, not an intention exactly, but that the pattern is, a pattern. She believes in the pattern. Okay, we're seeing Matt undergoing a character change. It's not feeling so good. Oh, what a gorgeous shot of Tarvalon, or Tarvalon, depending how you say it. The bridges inside the river. That's beautiful. That does not look cheap, but it looks gorgeous. The White Tower, not quite how I imagined it, but I think it looks good. A camel on there, okay. Nice! Finally, we got some Wheel of Time level swearing. I want to make a brief comment on Nynaeve's feelings here. For book readers, if you haven't read The Eye of the World in a while, you might forget just how antagonistic Nynaeve behaves toward Moraine. If anything, she is a condescending bully in that first book. I love her character. I think she matures a lot. Hey. In later episode or later books, but in the first book she is not very nice, and she is almost arrogant to the point of being unlikable, but she does have, I think, a lot of pride. Nynaeve does, and that isn't quite coming through in this version of the story, but I imagine that they are instead focusing on helping the reader understand the situation that a new channeler is in when they discover that they can channel. This is explained narratively in the books, like you get descriptions of it in people's heads, but when you do something in a TV medium, you have to show it. So I think they're taking the opportunity to show the importance of that, how that experience is going to be for Nynaeve. We also had that story from Nynaeve earlier in the series on episode 1, I think, when she has that confrontation with Moraine at the pool, and she says that her teacher walked all the way to Tarvalon and they took one look at her, dirty clothes and poor upbringing and turned her away. So Nynaeve has this impression that Aes Sedai are all elitist, classist. This show is going to turn that on its head, or at least I hope so. I am hoping that we are going to find out that Nynaeve's teacher could not channel, despite thinking she could listen to the wind. And I also am hoping that Siuan Sanche is going to be introduced with all of that fishmonger's daughter background story that we get for her in the books. I would love for them to show the regality of Siuan Sanche, the Amerlin seat, with all the pomp and circumstance with which a Amerlin seat is introduced, and then have her open her mouth with this really coarse Terran accent and start talking about fish guts. That would be amazing. Is that a portal stone? I think we saw one of those in the last episode too, although I didn't point it out. This isn't really that too far off from the books. In the books, they do talk about how the White Cloaks are stirring around Tarvalon, causing trouble. That happens in the Great Hunt. Anaya today explains it to Moraine. So this isn't that far off from what happens in the books, really. Like two really religious groups facing off with very different ideas about what constitutes morality, I guess, in this case. It's an interesting thematic concept that doesn't happen in the books, but it's interesting. Oh, good. Mention of the prophecy. Oh, is this loyal? Okay. Okay. So I was prepared somewhat for the way they were going to make Loyal look in the TV show, and I mean I didn't like it. It's not what I envisioned Loyal looking like when I read the books, but to be honest, it is difficult to visualize Loyal. Like, we know he's big, and he's not big in this because I think they have budget constraints for how much CGI and camera tricks they're able to do with this. So they are instead relying on costumes and makeup and other ways of interpreting the character that will be more flexible for keeping the character in as many scenes as possible throughout the series. But I will say I did not imagine Loyal as blonde, but I really didn't imagine his hair color at all. I think the books mostly talk about him having a broad nose. He does have that. Having pointed ears, which I'm not sure. We'll see if they show up a little more clearly later. And then I think like long eyebrows that kind of dangle down his face. Or maybe I just saw fan art of that, and so it's like stuck in my mind as the way Loyal looks. I definitely didn't imagine Loyal the way he looks in the cover of The Great Hunt, which you can take a look at and see if that matches your description. I've seen so many different interpretations of Loyal that I think there was no way that they could have gotten this right. So it is what it is. It doesn't ruin the story for me. I think that most people probably aren't going to like it. Probably everyone's going to find something wrong with it. But so far, the way he is speaking is really hitting it. That does sound like the way the character sounds, even the way Michael Kramer reads him in the audiobook. So, let's give it a chance. Let's give it a chance. I like the way he delivers the lines, and that does happen in the books. Not word for word, but like pretty close. Okay, and he's smiling. So Logain has the talent with a capital T. He can see Taviran, and this is only different in the sense that both of them are there, which keeps us guessing. And Matt's paranoia, of course, is going to make him think that Logain probably can see something else. This is great. So a couple interesting things here. They're definitely hinting to the audience that Matt might suspect that he can channel, which isn't because he's done anything that would, be indicative of using the one power, but Moraine did say that she was looking for the Dragon Reborn, which means that all of the cast of main characters have the potential to be the Dragon Reborn, and also would probably want to deny that they are the Dragon Reborn for, reasons that are obvious to book readers, but I think are still being revealed to people who have not read the books. So I think that this scene is helpful in elucidating why the Chosen One is such a raw deal in this book series, and that is one of the main themes that Robert Jordan was trying to convey when he wrote the Wheel of Time. It was this concept of being the Chosen One is actually the worst, because it is a thankless job, it is dangerous, and he's added a whole lot of other reasons as to why it is horrible. So neither of these characters, none of the characters want to be the dragon. I think it's a little bit less traumatic for the two girls, which we've been told in this TV show have the potential as well. But I think none of them want that. So this is an important plot point to bring through to readers or to viewers of the TV show who have not read the book. So I don't dislike that this conversation is taking place, even though it doesn't happen in the original Eye of the World story, again, because a lot of that happens in internal thinking in the story, and you have to find a way that you can show that same information without having characters do really clunky monologue scenes. So I think that this was a way to convey that, and it works pretty well. I also think it's interesting that Matt's character is so desperate to make sure that he won't be abandoned if it ends up being that he is the Dragon Reborn. And that's interesting because of how Matt reacts in the actual book series, because he's not the best friend, I will say. At least he's very reluctant to be the friend of the Dragon Reborn, and so this is an interesting way to show that dynamic, especially if they keep it that way in the series. Yeah. No. Not sure what it's time for. I guess we're gonna find out. But again, these warder scenes are not in the books, but the concept that they are conveying absolutely is, and I think it is nice to see the importance of this relationship between the Aes Sedai and their warders in season 1 when we meet Aes Sedai and warders, and not kind of dribbled throughout the information dropping the way it happens in the book series. I think this is particularly important because when I watch react videos from non-book readers on this series, they are still asking questions about this relationship. So what this shows me is that the scriptwriters understood that this scene was necessary to have an understanding of how the relationship between the characters are functioning in the Aes Sedai and the warders in particular, through this character who, I don't know if he's going to remain part of the series, or if we're going to find that he kills himself or something at the end of this episode, but it's showing us the importance of that bond, and that is such a necessary thing for what happens, later in the books. So I think that this, taking some time out to do this while they are in Tar Valon, is not a bad idea. It's not in the books, but this is not a bad idea. It is a little bit slow. It's a little bit of a downer. So we'll see how the episode picks up from here. But people who want it to slow down and focus on character bonds and relationships, this is what that feels like. So I'm going to pause here. So I will say these are effective interrogation techniques from Valda, who is described as a terrifying questioner in the books. Valda's not actually in the Eye of the World, or at least he's not a prominent character. It is the child buyer who abuses Perrin under the White Cloak encampment with Geofarm Bornhold. So this is obviously a departure from the Eye of the World canon, but it's, I think, more immediate. Like, I am much more worried about these characters in this version of the story than I was during the books. I think the worst that happens to Perrin is he gets kicked a couple of times and has some bruised ribs in the books before both the wolves and Moiraine and Nynaeve and Lan rescue them. So this is different, but it is pretty compelling. So I'm curious to see how book readers are going to react to this as well as book readers, but it's certainly, it's vicious. We don't like that guy. We're setting up some very hateable villains with this scene. So again, I like the development for Liandrin. I'm trying to remember Liandrin's backstory, or at least what we get of it from the books. I remember that she was very poor and very envious of people who are wealthy, and she has spent a lot of her life trying to mimic people like Moiraine, who were born in palaces. We also know that she hates men, like well and truly hates men, but I think part of what was interesting about this scene is that drop that men still have too much power in the world from Liandrin's perspective. And I like hearing that because I have heard some commentary from people who have been watching the show and feel like they're changing the world of Wheel of Time to be tilted more towards a matriarchy, and the Wheel of Time book series is much more of a story about equality. There is rampant prejudice between the different sexes toward each other, but there is not systemic sexism. So I think that they're actually going to preserve that in the TV show. I think this was an indication from, even though Liandrin doesn't have she's not the most reliable character for information and interpretation of events, I still think that is what they are planning to do for the TV show, and we are starting to see some of the conversations around gender happen, and I think that is a good addition. So let's see what Liandrin is trying to do with Nynaeve. Obviously she's trying to recruit her for the Reds, but we'll see what kind of devious tactics she has in mind. Matt is actually creepier in that scene in The Eye of the World. Obviously, that scene takes place in Camelin and not Tar Valon in the book series, but Matt says so many creepy things to Nynaeve when she, thinks that he's sick and tries to take care of him, and he says some creepy things to Egwene too, and then when Moiraine shows up, he really loses it. So we're going to see if Nynaeve is going to realize that her herbal powers and her complete lack of training in how to channel is going to persuade her to bring Moiraine to Matt. That seems like it's a possibility at this juncture. Okay, before we get into this, are they going to be able to break Egwene scene? That story that Nynaeve just told about Egwene having breakbone fever is not verbatim from the books, but pretty close. That is the story that Nynaeve tells Moiraine about how she first channeled. But she did not know that she was channeling at the time, and it is not clear if she realizes now that she was the one to save Egwene from that sickness. The only difference is that in the books, the old wisdom believed that Egwene would recover, that the fever just takes longer before it breaks, and Nynaeve didn't have enough patience, so she channeled, again, not realizing that she was channeling to progress the recovery that Egwene needed. So in the books, it wasn't a deadly illness, but I think that this change is perfectly fine, and I can see how the transition to Egwene's character surviving this torture by the White Cloaks is really significantly important. I'm also loving that this kind of slow down heart-to-heart conversations that these characters are having are giving us more of a view into the range of the actors, because things have been moving so fast that we really haven't gotten a chance to see them have some like really dramatic emotional performances, and this episode is giving us that. So I'm pleased to see that. Again, we are getting emotional performances from these actors that haven't had a lot to do so far in the story, and I think it's really good. They're giving Perrin a cathartic moment where he is welcoming torture from the White Cloaks because he feels such guilt and shame and a sense of hopelessness from what happened in the show's interpretation of events, where he murdered his wife on the night of the Trolloc attack. And this is an emotional, evocative scene. I've seen people who have been watching the show like wondering whether or not Perrin and Egwene had this conversation off screen. Clearly they did not. They are having it now. And I think this is a more realistic way to show this conversation happening, because I cannot imagine being Perrin in that situation, even being able to start that conversation. Like, I think just finding the words, even if you know people love you, to admit that you did something even on accident that was so horrendous would be just next to impossible. So I think that this cathartic moment is going to be very important for Perrin's character development, again, in this version of the story. At the end of the season, I will reflect on this entire creative change that they have made and see whether or not I think it worked, whether I think it was necessary to bring in a viewing audience. But for right now, I'm going to say that this scene, although obviously not in the books, is working for the story that they've set up. I was really hoping a wolf was going to come through the canvas and like take Valda by the throat. What happened was fine too. There it goes. Yeah. I'm going to be interested in seeing non-book readers react to that. I'm not sure it's clear what the Forsaken are, and obviously we still have some episodes to go, so there's time to elaborate on that, but I can see somebody misinterpreting these statue figurines as if they are like non-human gods or gods in human form or something like that, if you've watched a lot of fantasy series and don't know the lore of this one particularly. Although, to be fair, when I read The Eye of the World, I don't remember specifically because it was so long ago, but I probably had some of the same confusion, so I guess we will just let the story unfold and see how it goes. This is an interesting scene here. One thing, they're playing up that Alanna and Moiraine have more of a friendship than I remember from the books. I remember that Moiraine and Anaya Sedai, who is the blunt-faced blue Aja Sedai, were close, but Anaya doesn't do much in the book, so I can see them swapping that friendship with Alanna, who has more of an important story arc, and isn't somebody that Moiraine would casually dislike, even if she disagreed with some of her methods. So that's fine. And then they're I'm not sure what to think about them saying that Moiraine is strong enough to maybe be the Amerlin seat. I do not recall in the books that Moiraine was particularly strong. I think she was an average Aes Sedai at best. With the Angreal, she had a lot more strength, which she presumably used in Emond's Field during Winter Night. I think we saw it actually when she unwrapped that statue figurine, different figurine than she has in the books, but it doesn't matter that much. So I don't know why they're making this change. It might just be because viewers like their main character, and Moiraine has kind of been set up as the main character in season 1 of the show to be formidable. And it doesn't really impact the story if Moiraine has more strength in the TV show than she has in the books, in particular because she gets stronger in the books, which isn't supposed to be possible, but it does happen for her, at least until the end of the series. They may also be setting up Liandrin to replace Elida too, though I don't know how they will carry that off. We'll play up Nynaeve and Lan's relationship in the TV show, which I actually like. Their romance came kind of out of nowhere in Eye of the World. I mean, it's important that they show all of this because they're going to have limited opportunities, and a lot of this information is conveyed through narration and characters thinking. So taking the opportunity now, considering the impact it has later in the story, I think is important. A lot's more like religious observation in the TV show than in the books. Again, I am really curious how this is going to hit non-book readers, because a lot of them have talked about what is this relationship between the Aes Sedai and the Warders, and if you are waiting for that, man, that's what this episode is about. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, this episode 5 of The Wheel of Time is really about love, loss, and sacrifice. And all of the different types of love that are displayed in this episode through different interactions between different characters with different relationships with each other is what makes this episode so emotionally compelling. I mean, you have the bond with Stepan and Karenna Sade, obviously. That's not going to matter to fans of the books who are questioning, who are these characters and why should we care about them. But it is a vehicle to understanding the importance of the bond between all Aes Sedai and all of their warders. So we understand the bond between Lan and Moiraine through this exemplary couple, Stepan and Karenna. What is going to happen if Moiraine dies? What is going to happen if Lan dies? What happens if Lan falls in love with Nynaeve when he's already in this lifelong, deeply emotional, committed relationship with Moiraine? These are questions that viewers of the TV show are now asking themselves as a result of this episode spending so much time on this, and it is that important. We also see different types of relationships, not just bonded relationships. So we see the warders bonding with each other. We see Lan's friendship with Stepan and his ability to just be a good friend to another man who is going through a hard time. We also see that reflected in the way Rand is taking care of Matt in the inn, even though he doesn't seem to want any help. Matt, I mean. We also see Nynaeve and Rand have a moment when they reunite later in the episode, and we see Egwene bonding with Perrin among the traveling people, and then being willing to sacrifice herself so that Perrin can have the chance to live a full life and reconcile with what happened on Winter's Night. All of these different relationships are shown in beats throughout this episode, and it's just making all of the characters' interactions with each other and the way they feel about each other come through in the story in a manner that hasn't really been possible until we were able to take this pause. So I think that is why this episode needs to exist and why it feels, a bit different from some of the previous episodes. We also see, hints of Moraine's relationships with the other Aes Sedai, and there's a boatload of different things that are happening there, and I think some subtleties that are being hinted at where it's not really quite clear how Moiraine feels about these people or how these people feel about her. we definitely pick up on some animosity between Leandrin and Moiraine, but it also seems more complicated than that, because there is that moment when Leandrin kind of reaches out and tucks Moraine's hair behind her ear, and I've read different interpretations of this, but there is some text, like backstory to these characters for the TV show, that hints at them having some kind of a complicated past. So whether that is an indication of Leandrin being jealous of Moiraine and trying to manipulate her in some way, or them having had some kind of a romantic connection previously in the story that wasn't in the books, but maybe a compelling angle for the present story. I'm not sure yet. Certainly they don't seem to like each other too much now. We also see Moiraine and Alana having a moment together in the bedroom, and there was a little bit of a flirtatious vibe from Alana, but I think she's definitely described as being polyamorous, so anything coming from her could just be her, and it's not necessarily that those two have had any kind of a history, although they could have done. Again, I think that the story is going to be a little bit more overt in these LGBTQ relationships that happen between people of the same gender, especially in a location like the White Tower, where it is all Aes Sedai with all Aes Sedai, or Aes Sedai in training pretty much all of the time. It is canon in the books that Moiraine and Swan had a pillow friend relationship when they were younger. My interpretation of their relationship in the books was that it was more of a friendship that turned into something more and lasted a while, but was not carried through to present day. But they may change that in the TV show and make that relationship deeper and more immediate and ongoing, which doesn't necessarily mean that the future of the story will remain that way. It is very possible that we can still have Swan have a relationship with Garth Bren, and that Tom's deep feelings for Moiraine will manifest at a much later date in the story. So we'll just have to wait and see on that, but I would not be surprised if we see that Moiraine and Swan still have a relationship, in particular because of the things that Alana said to Moiraine in the bedroom, where she said, you have the potential to become the Amyrlin seat, again in this version of the story, but you have two very powerful enemies here. And she was referring, I think, to both Leandrin and Swan Sanche, who is the current Amyrlin seat. And Moiraine plays that very cool. She does not give a lot of information or emotion to other people in the tower. This is something she was trying to tell Nynaeve also not to do, but Nynaeve takes a very different approach when it comes to how she emotionally relates to others. But I think it is very possible that Moiraine is in a romantic relationship with Swan still, and nobody knows it. And that this little drop of "you have powerful enemies" is supposed to indicate that everyone else, as far as they're aware, believe that Swan and Moiraine no longer get along, and they have forgotten that they were very close when they were accepted in training, and we might actually even get to see some of what their experience was like when they were accepted, based on, I think there's been casting for like a young Swan Sanche and possibly a young Moiraine, so we might actually get flashbacks of their experience in the tower, in particular I think around the prophecy. So that's where things are going. This episode was about the relationships so that we will care about the stakes of what happens to these characters in future episodes, and that is very important for viewing audiences who have not read the books, but I think also an enjoyable experience for people who have read the books, because you're getting more content set in the Wheel of Time world that is, yes, different from the books, but still feels thematically correct or close enough to what the story was intending to convey behind the scenes. So I am very excited for the next episodes. I am anticipating that all of our main cast will reunite, that we will see the power of the full tower, the full White Tower in some capacity in the next section, whether that's cleansing Mat of the influence of the dagger, or Nynaeve and Egwene being inducted into the tower as novices and potentially accepted, or through some other capacity. And then there will be some kind of a transition. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but some kind of a transition into the next conflict of the story leading up to the climax, which I hope is going to be set around the Eye of the World, going to Faldara, and all of the things that happen at the end of the book. Although I'm honestly hoping that it's an improvement on the end of the book, because I think Eye of the World's ending is fairly confusing. Even though I've read it several times, I find some aspects of it confusing. So it might actually be a better experience in the book, and that could convert some book readers, potentially, who have been hesitant or had some reservations of how the story is being adapted so far. Like, if they nail that ending, if they really stick it, I think everyone's going to be super excited for season 2. So fingers crossed that it's going to be a great, great ride. If you're enjoying my videos so far, please, please, please like this video, comment on this video, share this video. I would love to get into YouTube's recommendation for React videos and content associated for the Wheel of Time, and my understanding is that a certain level of visibility has to be achieved before that happens. So again, if you enjoyed this video, if you want me to make more, please like, please subscribe, please comment, and I will see you next time.